Whenever you're ready, Tim.
Thanks, Paulie. And as I mentioned earlier, we will spend this first part of the meeting learning about what it is like to live with schizophrenia from those who are afflicted. Learning about what the symptoms and health effects of the condition are, how they impact daily living. So let's take a look at our discussion questions that we want you to address in this session. Very good.
Question 1, of all the symptoms of schizophrenia, which have the most significant impact on you or your loved one's daily life?
And the second is, are there specific activities that you or your loved ones cannot do because of schizophrenia?
And the third one, how does schizophrenia affect you or your loved ones on the best and the worst days? Describe your best days and your worst days, best you can.
Fourth, how have your schizophrenia symptoms changed over time?
Number 5, have you ever lost a job, been homeless, been a victim of a crime, or been arrested or jailed as a result of schizophrenic symptoms?
And sixth and finally of this first set, what worries you most about your schizophrenia? So with those things in mind, this gives us, if you will, kind of the same roadmap in anticipating our shared journey today. To help us delve into the answers to these questions, we're going to testimonials from a panel of people living with schizophrenia and a caregiver of someone living with schizophrenia. To get us started, my co-host Paulie will share his experience. So Paulie, thank you for being brave and leading us on.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. And I want to say that I can't express my gratitude enough to fellow members of the community here for your bravery in being here along with us. I am so honored to be here as not just a moderator, but a panelist. And by the way, the video you're going to see that I filmed myself is in a multimedia room of a clubhouse community in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I'm a new member. Someone later on in the show here will talk about being a clubhouse member in a different community. But for people who've been diagnosed with schizophrenia and other brain diseases and conditions, communities like that are very important. They're safe places for us to gather together. So let's watch videos of the panelists. You'll hear me tell some of my story, and then we'll also hear from ANITA, David, Zahura, and Julie, who have all bravely agreed to speak about their experiences. So let's take a look.
Hello, my name is Paulie Benjamin. First of all, I feel it necessary to express my gratitude for being asked to do this. It is a great honor for me to have this opportunity to tell you a bit of my story in the hope we can help people like myself who have suffered with mental conditions, illnesses, and diseases of the brain and the mind for far too long. And suffered not because we have these conditions, so much as because of the misunderstandings and stigmas surrounding our conditions. When I was almost 18, I left my family for the first time in my life and went off to college. By the time I was 20, my new life had come crashing down. The stress of living on my own, which many young adults experience, had turned to paranoia. Everywhere I went, everyone I met, everything was against me. I grew so scared that my paranoia caused me to move back in with my parents and pull away from almost everyone and everything I held dear. With therapy and pharmaceutical treatment, I was able to renew my life and be happy again. However, although eventually I started a good family, I went off my medication because I figured I didn't need it anymore, even though I was unknowingly self-medicating with alcohol and other means. My marriage began to fall apart, and other stressors led me to inpatient therapy and other treatments, including new pharmaceuticals 3 times. At almost 30, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Eventually, I got divorced and almost lost everything again. Today, I see my diagnosis as a very good thing. It did set me on a path that was much easier to tread and see and feel towards who I am today, made stronger because of the knowledge of my symptoms and suffering of my schizophrenia, not in spite of them. But only quite recently, I've come to realize much of my suffering was due to viewing my mental illness as only negative conditions. Now I've chosen not to ignore negativity nor pretend it doesn't exist, but to make it something I and I alone perceive to be positive. Like when I hallucinate sights, sounds, and intentions, sometimes called thought insertion. In the past, these things would scare me. Examples: that person winked at me. Why? The song on the radio is intended to convey some special meaning just for me. What is it? I heard a whisper that what I was just thinking about is a good idea. Who said that? Now, instead of fright born of surprise and confusion, I've trained myself to see, listen, and pay attention to these things, and then let them go. Perhaps that person did wink, but they're 50 feet away from me. We're in a crowded room, they're talking to other folks, and there's a fan blowing on them. Perhaps that song resonates with me in a good way, helping me with perspective I haven't had before. Perhaps someone did just whisper, but my mind heard what it wanted to, or maybe it was just the wind after all. On my best days, I truly am my best in all ways. I can move, talk, laugh, and love in ways that continue to astound even me at times. And many people, I'm sure, will tell you that as gullible as I am, my ego can be gigantic, and I tend to enjoy thinking I'm 2 steps ahead of everyone, and therefore I shine a bit of the hard to impress, easy to bore attitude. But in truth, at my core, it's anything but that. On my best days, I shine not to impress, but to share. However, on my worst days, my best qualities turn sour. My ego remains large but is hollow. I need affirmation, support, and consolation that I'm okay, all the while bleeding the emotional resources of those who want to help me. I tell myself it's so I can help others, but it's not. It's because I so desperately need help. On those days when I shine, it's to fight, to conquer, and control. If I'm shining at all. I'm not a bad person. Indeed, even on my best days, I can be a glorious warrior. But when I feel bad, I'm utterly selfish. Thankfully, people who truly love me have told me time and time again that I do have an enormous resource of love and kindness to share with others. They've stuck with me and are the very pillars on which I've learned to build my own base of support. And now I'm finding new and awesome ways to pay them back. One of those ways is here, telling a bit of my story. The one thing that troubles me, though, the most about schizophrenia is those who exhibit undiagnosed symptoms of the disease in antisocial or destructive ways. A friend of mine once told me about his son who was diagnosed with autism. He said to me, "I see signs of it all over in people who are not diagnosed." How many people are suffering from schizophrenia? Symptoms not because they're in denial, but because humanity's attitude and treatment for mental diseases has been so stigmatized, criminalized, and marginalized that people are trained to be terrified to admit their negative behavior is truly worthy of help. I believe, if nothing else, we're all here to learn from each other what we can all do best to enhance the ever-evolving beauty of life. So let's do that. Let's help each other. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anita Fisher. My husband and I are the caregivers of an adult son who has lived with co-occurring disorder, schizophrenia, and substance use disorder for the last 22 years. Since his diagnosis, we have become shepherds of his daily living needs. Prior to his diagnosis, he was a great student and exhibited no symptoms of schizophrenia or any other mental health condition. From the ages of 18 to 22, he served in the Army as a medical specialist stationed at Walter Reed Hospital. He came home one summer and he was drinking very heavily and very disorganized, and this was very much out of character for him. When he returned, this drinking and disruptive behavior landed him in the brig. During that time, he was seen by a psychologist, and he was going to be processed out of the Army under a bad conduct discharge. I was there for his court-martial hearing, and it was the first time I heard that psychologist say he is diagnosed with symptoms of schizophrenic form disorder, and he is not malingering. And I was totally stunned by that because there had never been any kind of mental health diagnosis or issue in regards to my son. He exhibits textbook symptoms of paranoia, delusional thoughts, auditory hallucinations, extreme disorganization in speech and environment. We can always detect when he has stopped his medication. He stops communicating with family, he loses his belongings, he starts to isolate in his room, and he also exhibits the symptom of anosognosia, which is lack of insight that his symptoms have returned. All of this led to jail, prison, homelessness cycles throughout even great periods of recovery. When his symptoms are actively present, he's unable to hold any type of job, manage finances, keep up with appointments, and that's where we come in as the family. He's been prescribed at least 6 different medications over time, primarily low dosage and only one medication at a time. The last one was a long-acting injectable that he took every 30 days. And when he is on his medication and treatment, he actually functions very well in life. He has a great quality life, manages all of, his everyday needs and living even sometimes semi-independently. But when he is not on his medication and the longer he is off of them, his mental decompensation worsens. And this disrupts the ability for him to live with the family. And that's when he will leave the home sometimes, go to the streets, and ends up using street drugs and alcohol, and then landing in jail. He says he stops taking his medication because of the side effects, and he describes them as involuntary movements, tardive dyskinesia, impotency, sedation, and that is both with the pill and LAIs. When he stops his antipsychotic medication, his lack of insight that his symptoms has returned makes him believe that he doesn't need to resume them. We do have discussions about the benefits versus risks, but even showing him photos of himself before and after. After 22 years on this journey with our son and brother, we remain hopeful for a cure or medication that will allow him to have a consistent quality of life living with schizophrenia. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Geiger, and I have schizophrenia, a serious mental illness or SMI. I was 25 years old in 1979 when I had my first experience with schizophrenia. It was manifested primarily with delusional thinking, which led to a tragic experience, the death of my wife and severely injuring my then infant son. And I still pay for that today in the courts. I went to trial and was acquitted as not guilty by reason of insanity. In May 2000, I had a relapse. Since my most recent release from the hospital in 2004, I have had no problems. I remarried twice and still live now with my third wife since July 2016. She does her share of paying the bills and I pay mine. Her friends have also befriended me. One of them has an autistic son. Another worked in a psychiatric hospital as part of her life experience. I struggled, but nevertheless, in 2018, I won the Albert Nelson Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award from Marquis Who's Who. In my dating days, I met a German woman who I will call Luella Kirchganger, who is a medical researcher for Big Pharma, specializing in medications for schizophrenia. We dated for a while. When we broke up, because of my illness, she asked me if I feel any difference between being sick and being normal. I said, yes. Now, how do I describe that to people who don't understand that uncontrollable thoughts go through my mind? These thoughts have a basis in what I experience as a normal person, and they go off on their own. It is like the left side of my brain is having an argument about reality with the right side of my brain. So some symptoms, okay? The CV is talking to me. I see the suicidal thoughts. I hear a voice that I attribute to God. I heard other voices as well. My bed rocks at times and wakes me up. I'm still trying to explain that one. Okay, I've seen an unusual cloud formation, say a perfect circle or a dragon. I took chlorpromazine for a while when I was at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. The doctor took me off of it to see how I would react without medication. I did very well for many years, from 1979 to 2000. When I was released from Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital in 2004, I was put back on meds. Risperidone with the benzodiazepine replacement for side effects. I am still on these. I never felt depressed. Okay. I have been most fortunate to have recovered to full remission despite what the judge says. She says that schizophrenia is incurable and therefore I need to be monitored by the court. I am monitored by a psychiatrist and there is no evidence for this. The worst things that happened are the actions that took place in 1979. The memories remain with me. They never go away. People don't understand what it is to live with the memories. What worries me most, though, about having schizophrenia is having a relapse that puts me back into the hospital for years to come. My life will be over. Someone asked me once, how do the symptoms of schizophrenia and their negative effects affect your life on the best days and on the worst days? Well, most people, if they hear of my illness, leave me alone or treat me on a professional level. The court is a problem for me. It seems the judge is determined to ruin my life. She has taken job opportunities away from me. She laughs at me. She took my 2 children, both over the age of 30, away from me because I sent them Hallmark cards once per month. I do feel good when I get some recognition for my book, In the Matter of Edwin Potter. I suggest strongly that you read it. There are no best days, really. I live from one day to the next working on my writing, my drawing, my job at the supermarket.
Hi, my name is Zahora, and I'm a schizophrenic group leader. I have a peer support specialist certification, and I have a psychiatric technician certification. And now I want to talk to you about the homelessness in Detroit. And it was a conspiracy going on in Detroit. And they were trying to run the African Americans out of their places so that they can bring the people that moved out of Detroit up north. They wanted them to come back. So at first, they put expressways going through the Black communities. I-94, I-96, and I-97 tore up the Black communities and their commerces and everything that they had, the businesses and everything was taken away. So we had changes in the administration and all that. And so the landlords was in the conspiracy that they wouldn't fix the property up and forced me to move. And even if I went into escrow accounts, the courts even forced me to move also. And so the safety inspection engineers and the tenant council court, they always are against the Black homeowners and the renters. So I had 6 evictions during that time. My diagnosis for schizophrenia was schizoaffective. I was faced with using drugs like marijuana and pills, you know, downers and uppers, and drinking alcohol. So I had a diagnosis of agoraphobia and schizophrenic paranoia. And so I was violated at one time, and it was a dark past of brokenness. And I lost my family because of homelessness, and I got them back after working so hard, getting them back in the court. I even tried to die by suicide, but I don't have those ideations any longer. Things started getting better as I began guardianship with my mother, and my daughter was looking over me, and got the children returned home to me. And now I moved down here in South Carolina, and I've been living independent for 7 years. I changed my belief system. I have a holy sacrament that I have to hold dear to myself, to worship and help people in need, same as I had helped people in need. And my future aspect is to can continue on getting my bachelor master's degree program and to soon have a business of my own. Thank you.
I'm diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, general anxiety disorder, and depression. My diagnosis came shortly after the birth of my daughter in 1993. I did battle depression throughout my high school and college years, and I had thoughts of suicide and I acted in self-harm. In 1993, after having my daughter, I began hearing voices telling me to harm her and myself. I knew this was not normal. I immediately called my obstetrician. He told me it was a simple case of baby blues and every new mother went through this phase. He said I'd be fine. But the voices continued. I was concerned that I would end up hurting my child. And I was afraid to tell anyone about the voices because they might take my child from me. I decided to go to my primary care physician. He listened and referred me to a psychiatrist. However, the first appointment I could get was 6 weeks away. After that long wait to see the psychiatrist, I was placed in the hospital psychiatric unit. I was evaluated and placed on medication. At this point in my life, I was teaching full-time, working on my master's degree, a wife and a mom. I continued to hear voices and thoughts of suicide. I was hospitalized numerous times. When medication was not working, I agreed to have 9 ECT shock treatments. It was only a temporary fix. Soon the voices flooded back. In 1997, I went to the Meninger Clinic for 9 weeks of intensive treatment. The time there helped. However, it was decided that I could no longer handle the stress of teaching and had to give up my career. Throughout the years, I had to be hospitalized many times, and at times of stress, I struggled with voices and hallucinations. Schizophrenia not only affected myself, it affected my entire family. As I fought this mental illness, I found the love of food. I became addicted to food. The more stress I was under, the more food I would eat. I was using food as a way to self-medicate. It did not help that the medications I was on listed gaining weight as a top side effect. I was too drowsy to get out of bed. I tried to exercise, but I simply was just too exhausted. I lived to eat and sleep. Prior to mental illness, I was a healthy, active individual. I weighed around 175 pounds. As my illness increased, so did my weight. In 2018, I hit my highest weight of 400 pounds. I felt horrible. But thankfully, I had a wonderful husband that told me I was the most beautiful woman he had ever met. On May 13, 2019, my life was forever changed. My husband of 28 years had a massive heart attack in front of me in the driveway. I did CPR until the paramedics arrived. When I got to the hospital, the doctor told me my love of my life was gone. I have never felt such pain in my life. The loss of my husband sent me into a bout of psychosis and depression. Although food had always been my source of comfort, I couldn't eat. My friends and family tried to get me to eat. I wanted nothing to do with food. I soon dropped a lot of weight quickly. However, I knew it was necessary to eat to live, but I didn't want to live without him. My psychiatrist became very concerned about my quick weight loss. He placed me on 2 brand new antipsychotics. I had very little side effects. I became stable and my weight loss slowed. I started to feel a little better. In 2021, 2 years later, I was sent a letter informing me my antipsychotics were no longer on the formulary. My psychiatrist tried everything to keep me on my medications. None of our appeals were successful. My psychiatrist began a search for a new antipsychotic. As a team, we decided to go with older antipsychotics. I have now been on these medications for a few months. And I'm going through a rough patch. Dealing with psychosis is very difficult. I do have an advantage. I have dealt with schizophrenia for almost 30 years. I'm older and wiser. Most importantly, I know when to ask for help. I have been able to maintain my current weight of 240 pounds. I do fear that I'm going to gain weight being on the older antipsychotics. I am fully aware that there are side effects to the medications. With that knowledge, I hope I am better able to make healthier choices in my life.